The 1970s were a decade of broken promises on British roads. Oil crises, strikes, and crumbling factories left Britain's car industry fighting for survival, and the vehicles that rolled off those production lines often reflected every bit of that chaos. Buyers trusted their hard-earned wages to manufacturers who swore things had improved. Most of the time, they were wrong. From rust that appeared overnight to engines that gave up without warning, these cars became symbols of an industry in free fall. And the story behind number 1 is so embarrassing, it still makes automotive historians wince. Stay with us, because what's coming will shock you more than you expect. Number 10. Triumph Dolomite Sprint. Triumph Dolomite Sprint is a car that genuinely had the talent to be a legend. The Triumph Dolomite Sprint arrived in 1973 wearing one of the most advanced engines fitted to a British family saloon at the time. Its 16-valve, 2.0-litre unit was genuinely impressive on paper, producing 127 brake horsepower and offering performance that embarrassed many rivals. Journalists praised it. Showroom crowds gathered around it. For a brief moment, Triumph looked like it had finally cracked the formula. But that confidence faded fast. Owners discovered the cylinder head was fragile, prone to cracking under the kind of heat a daily driver regularly produces. The gearbox struggled to handle the power it was paired with, and the body began rusting at a rate that suggested the factory had skipped the anti-corrosion stage entirely. For a car marketed as sporting, refined, and forward-thinking, the reality was deeply frustrating. But that was only the beginning of this list. Things get considerably worse from here. Number 9. Austin Allegro. Austin Allegro is a name that still triggers groans at classic car meetings across Britain. Austin Allegro was launched in 1973 as the replacement for the beloved 1100 and 1300 range, and British Leyland's marketing team spoke about it with enormous confidence. It was supposed to be modern, practical, and comfortable. What buyers received was something quite different. The styling confused almost everyone who saw it, with its bulbous shape earning cruel nicknames almost immediately. The Quartic steering wheel, a square design with rounded corners, was mocked relentlessly in the press. Mechanically, early examples suffered from hydrogas suspension that regularly lost pressure, doors that refused to fit properly after any minor collision, and interior quality that felt unfinished at best. Consumer groups tested it and found serious concerns. Fleet buyers walked away. Private buyers felt deceived. Here was a car that should have secured British Leyland's future, and instead it accelerated the company's collapse. And this wasn't even the biggest embarrassment on that front. Number 8. Vauxhall Chevette. Vauxhall Chevette comes from a manufacturer that perhaps deserved better criticism than it received, which in some ways made the situation worse. The Vauxhall Chevette arrived in 1975 as a practical supermini aimed directly at everyday British families. Vauxhall positioned it as sensible, affordable, and dependable. On the surface, it looked harmless enough. Under that surface, reliability told a different story. Owners reported structural rust appearing within the first 2 years of ownership, particularly around the rear wheel arches and sills, in a pattern that suggested rust protection had barely been considered during development. The 1.3-litre engine was underpowered for motorway use and became notoriously thirsty in stop-start urban conditions. Wind and road noise inside the cabin were described by contemporary road tests as genuinely tiring on longer journeys. Vauxhall quietly improved the car over time, but by then reputations had already formed. Families who bought early examples felt let down by a brand they had trusted. And the frustration only deepened further up this list. Number 7. Morris Marina. Morris Marina is perhaps the most quietly resented car the 1970s ever produced. Morris Marina was launched in 1971 and remained in production throughout the decade, which is remarkable given how consistently it disappointed. British Leyland needed a conventional rear-wheel drive family saloon to compete with Ford, and the Marina was their answer. Engineers reportedly worked under enormous time and budget pressure, which explains why the finished product felt like a compromise at every level. The front suspension was borrowed directly from the Morris Minor, a design already considered outdated by the late 1960s. The steering was heavy, imprecise, and uninspiring. Body quality was poor, and rust arrived faster than most owners expected. The interior offered little in the way of comfort or quality finishing. Motoring journalists were rarely kind, and sales figures eventually reflected public disillusionment. The Marina became a symbol of British Leyland's inability to produce a genuinely competitive mainstream car. Would you have trusted this with your family's safety? Many buyers asked themselves the same question too late. Number 6. Leyland Princess. Leyland Princess represents one of the most peculiar failures of the entire decade. The Leyland Princess, launched in 1975 as the replacement for the 18 to 22 series, arrived wearing striking wedge styling that looked genuinely futuristic on British roads. The Hydraga's interconnected suspension offered a ride quality that impressed reviewers, and the spacious interior gave families real room to breathe. On paper, it ticked enough boxes to succeed. In practice, the problems accumulated relentlessly. The overhead camshaft engines proved troublesome in service, with timing chains and oil leaks causing repeated workshop visits. Body sealing was poor, meaning water found its way inside the cabin with depressing regularity. Crucially, it never received a hatchback body, which by the mid-1970s buyers increasingly expected as standard on a car of this size. Competitors offered practicality that the Princess simply could not match. Sales disappointed, reputation suffered, and the car was quietly discontinued before the decade ended. Stay with us, because the story behind number 4 is genuinely difficult to believe. Number 5. Triumph TR7. Triumph TR7 was a car that should have been a celebration and became an apology. It was launched in 1975 as the future of the famous TR sports car lineage, and anticipation among enthusiasts ran high. Here was a wedge-shaped, modern British sports car intended to conquer both home and American export markets. The reality crushed those expectations with considerable force. Early production at the Speak factory in Liverpool was plagued by industrial disputes that caused serious quality control failures. Cars left the factory with misaligned panels, electrical faults, and finishing problems that dealers found embarrassing to explain to customers. The fixed-head coupe design was controversial, removing the open-top experience that TR buyers traditionally cherished. The 2.0-liter engine felt underpowered for a car wearing sports car badges. American buyers, so critical to the model's commercial survival, rejected it in significant numbers. TR enthusiasts felt the badge had been disrespected. Most viewers have never heard the full story of what happened during production, and it only gets more troubling from here. Number 4. Reliant Robin. Reliant Robin is a car so deeply embedded in British comedy that it is almost impossible to discuss seriously, yet the story behind it is genuinely frustrating for the thousands of families who depended on it. Reliant Robin was launched in 1973 as the successor to the long-running Regal, wearing sharper styling courtesy of Ogle design and carrying a revised 850cc engine. Reliant marketed it at budget-conscious buyers, motorcycle license holders, and anyone struggling with the fuel crisis of the mid-1970s. On economy grounds, it made a reasonable case for itself. On almost every other ground, it struggled enormously. The single front wheel made handling genuinely unpredictable, and the risk of tipping under hard cornering was not a manufacturer's exaggeration but a daily reality for drivers who pushed even slightly beyond a cautious pace. The fiberglass body attracted mockery from almost every direction. Nicknames spread quickly. The press was rarely kind. Owners who had hoped for practical transport found themselves the subject of jokes they had not volunteered for. And what follows made even this look dignified. Number 3. Hillman Imp. Hillman Imp is a car with a tragic history that stretches beyond mechanical complaints into genuine human cost. Hillman Imp was launched in 1963 but remained in production until 1976, meaning an entire generation of 1970s buyers still encountered it fresh from showrooms. Roots Group had invested enormously in a brand new factory at Linwood in Scotland to produce it, under significant political pressure to bring manufacturing jobs to the region. The rear-mounted, all-aluminium 998cc engine was genuinely clever engineering for its era, but it proved fragile in daily use. Cylinder head gasket failures were common. The cooling system required constant attention. The rear-hinged front doors earned safety criticism. And the Linwood factory, chosen for political rather than industrial reasons, suffered labor relations problems throughout its life. Buyers who experienced repeated failures lost faith quickly, and Chrysler, who had absorbed roots by the early 1970s, showed little enthusiasm for solving problems that had existed from day one. Tell us in the comments if you ever owned one of these. Number 2. Austin Maxi. Austin Maxi is a car that came closer than almost anything else on this list to genuine greatness, which made its failure all the more painful. The Austin Maxi was launched in 1969 but remained a significant presence throughout the early 1970s, and British Leyland's ambitions for it were considerable. Here was Britain's first 5-door hatchback with a 5-speed gearbox, genuinely innovative features for the period. The flat-folding rear seats created enormous load space that competitors could not match. On specification alone, it should have dominated. Instead, the early gear change was widely described as one of the worst ever fitted to a British car. With a remote linkage so imprecise that selecting the correct gear required genuine concentration. Build quality varied dramatically between examples. The interior design felt unloved and poorly considered despite the clever packaging underneath. Dealers struggled to sell it against more refined European alternatives. You might think this is the worst car already, but number 1 changes everything, and the story is genuinely staggering. Number 1. Rover SD1. Number 1 belongs to a car that committed the most unforgivable crime possible in the automotive world. It promised genuine greatness and then failed to deliver it at every stage of production. The Rover SD1 launched in 1976 to extraordinary excitement. It won European Car of the Year in 1977. Its dramatic fastback styling drew comparisons to Italian supercars. The 3500 V8 engine offered performance that the executive class had rarely experienced from a British manufacturer. Journalists were euphoric. Showroom queues formed. And then the cars arrived in buyers' hands, and the euphoria collapsed almost immediately. Paint blistered and peeled within months. Electrical systems failed without warning. Assembly line workers later admitted that bolts were routinely left unfitted because the production pace allowed no time to thread them properly. Strikes halted deliveries for months at a time. Customers waited 6 months for cars that arrived with panels misaligned and windows that opened spontaneously in car parks. Here was the car that could have saved Rover, and instead became the most spectacular and heartbreaking failure of the entire decade. The 1970s left deep scars on British motoring. Behind every car on this list sat thousands of families who saved carefully, trusted completely, and drove home something that would test their patience for years. Some of these manufacturers never recovered. Some of these mistakes were never properly acknowledged. But the 1970s also produced brilliance, passion, and genuine innovation alongside the disasters, and that tension is what makes this decade so compelling to revisit. Which car on today's list frustrated you most? Let us know in the comments below. And subscribe to Britain Rewind for more stories from the roads that shaped this nation. Until next time.